Hello everyone and welcome to the craziest game of day one of the World Rapid and Blitz Championship that's currently being played in Poland. Well, a lot of you guys have requested this one. Basically, this is the most requested game from the first day. Jan-Krzysztof Duda versus Baadur Jobava, and both of them are on 4 points going into round 5. And whoever wins this will be the sole leader after the first day, as they will have 5 out of 5. So without further ado, let's check it out. It's quite a crazy one. The engine bar was playing ping pong with itself for for most of the game, so let's enjoy it. Duda with the white pieces opens with d4. We have d5, c4, and Jobava says that he does not respect his opponent at all. He plays d captures on c4, accepts the queen's gambit, and this is one of the gambits that people usually don't accept, but he's showing that he's ready to fight and that he wants to play for the win with the black pieces. So knight to f3, we have knight to f6 and e3 now, preparing to pick up the pawn here, bishop to g4, and now bishop captures on c4, the so-called Janowski-Larsen variation. We have e6, h3, challenging the bishop, bishop to h5, and knight to c3. And again, the knight is usually developed to d7, so you can advance the c pawn, but Jobava doesn't care. He just wants to be, well, as close to the action with his pieces. So knight to c6, we have a3, a6, and now there are some games where b4 was played, also bishop back to e2 was played, so you can move your knight. Castles is a known move, but here Duda plays g4, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So bishop back to g6, we have knight to h4 going after the bishop, and the bishop to d6 now, just continuing development. Knight captures, pawn captures, and bishop to d2 now. So white eliminated one of black's bishops, but black has the open h file to be used for the rook. So e5, Jobava tries to open up the center. The white king also still on e1, and d5, Duda keeping the center closed. Knight to e7, and now even g5, kicking the other knight back as well. Knight to d7, and now queen to g4. We have knight to f5, and now this knight is excellently placed, and for the moment you can't really kick it away. Any e4 ideas can be met with either rook to h4, or you can even go knight to d4. You don't want to free this square for the knight, so instead h4, taking away this square from the black rook, and now bishop back to e7. We have queenside castles by Duda, and now knight to d6, attacking the bishop, bishop back to e2, and now knight to c5. So a really crazy position where white definitely controls a lot of space, but it's a wrapped game. It's hard to make sense of what's what. So queen back to g2, preparing bishop to g4 at some point, because black has to develop the queen somehow, and probably queen to d7 will be played. So b5, Jobava already starting the attack on the queen side, and he's probably going to castle kingside, even though this h-pawn is already very far advanced, but it's going to be an extremely double-edged position. So king to c2, Duda doesn't want to see this knight coming to b3, and rook to b8 now, preparing to further push with b4, and now knight to a2, controlling that b4 square, even though b4 here is perfectly fine and is the strongest move for white, as it is in many positions. So here knight to a2, controlling b4, and now queen to d7. And now that the queen has been developed, the bishop is coming to g4. So bishop g4 attacks the queen, and now knight to f5. We have knight to b4 now, trying to get the knight all the way to c6, and rook to b6. It's going to be very useful here, at least when the knight comes to c6, your rook will not be attacked. So bishop to c3, attacking the e5 pawn, and now Jobava starts the attack on the queen side. We have a5, attacking the knight on b4, knight to c6, and now finally b4. And, well, that's what you get when you don't push b4 with the white pieces. So bishop captures on e5, we have b captures on a3, b captures on a3, and now Jobava just castles, saying your king is wide open, I'm going to attack on the queen side. And even though the engine prefers white in this position, and you can very easily open up the game with h5, it's very, very hard to play this with little time on the clock. So Duda starts with h5. This is the absolute best way to continue the game, and Jobava takes the knight on c6, plays rook captures on c6, and now he wants to get to the queen into the game via queen to e6 and the queen to b3. So d captures and queen to e6, going for that queen to b3 check, then it could be a little bit dangerous. So of course Duda blocks this, he plays queen to d5, and now knight captures on e3 with a nice forking check, but also you're going to pick up the bishop with the queen. So f captures on e3, queen captures on g4, and it seems like Jobava made a little bit of progress here, but the position is completely winning for white. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the winning idea for Duda while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the idea that you have to open up this diagonal. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the move is h6. This is completely crushing and there is no way for black to defend this position. I'm just going to show you a really fun line to give you an example of what happens, well, if black puts up a decent amount of defense. Let's say queen f5 check. You're going to block this with e4. Let's say knight captures on e4. Now black is threatening all sorts of nasty discoveries. White just plays h captures on g7. And there's really nothing you can do here. For example, knight f6 check. You open up a discovery here and you can even win the white queen, but white doesn't care. Just rook d3. And now if you capture the queen with knight captures, rook to h8 is checkmate. So you can't allow this. You can't allow the bishop to defend the g7 pawn, and if you play something like king captures on g7, then we move the bishop, and that's it. There is no move you can play here. For example, queen captures on d5 is met with rook captures on d5, and that's it. We're just gonna gobble up all of the pieces here, and white is up simply too much material. And instead of maybe trading queens, you could go for queen captures on g5, but it doesn't help. We're just gonna capture the queen here, so that's actually a silly move, but there are no moves you can play here. It's just a completely hopeless position. So instead, after queen captures on g4, Duda doesn't go h6, he goes h captures on g6, which also looks very appealing. You open up the h file, but you don't quite open up this diagonal. So here we have queen to f5 with check, e4, and now queen captures on g6. This is the pawn that, of course, Jobava grabs, and he's going to capture on e4 next. So bishop to f6. Here, there are a lot of moves you can play, and there are a lot of good moves. For example, rook to h4 followed by rook to h1. You could deliver rook to h8 checkmate. But it's as if Jobava's madness was transferred over to Duda, and he started playing mad moves. So bishop to f6. He now wants, of course, black to capture, so he can put a rook on g1. But Jobava just ignores him. Bishop to d6. We have bishop back to d4. Now attacking the knight here, but knight captures on e4. Now threatening all sorts of nasty discoveries. Rook to, sorry, not king c1, rook to d3, now blocking the nasty discoveries, and now rook to e8. We have king to b3, getting the king out of harm's way, and now knight captures on g5. So you can see that Jobava cleared all the problems he had in front of his king. Both of the pawns have been eliminated. And how do you play this? It's a pretty equalish position, but still the white king is wide open. The black king is very safe behind his pawn, so it's not easy to play this with white. Bishop back to c3. We have rook to b8 check, king to a2, and now we have knight to e4. Attacking the bishop here. So king to a1, not allowing this capture to come with check, but this is actually even worse. We have knight captures on c3. You could even go for this fork knight to f2, but Jobava goes for the absolute best. Knight captures on c3, rook captures, and queen to f6. Now attacking the rook here, the rook cannot move, and next you're going to play bishop to e5, add another attacker to the rook. You're going to play rook b3, add another attacker to the rook, and there's nothing white can do here unless... so here, queen to d3, defending the rook, now rook to b3. How will you defend this? Well, queen to h7 check, king to f8, queen to h8 check, king e7, and now rook to e1 check. Luckily, he has bishop to e5, otherwise it would be checkmate. The king has no squares. So here we have bishop to e5, and now queen to c8. Going for this queen to d7 check, and here we have queen to e6. And this is a terrible mistake in such a tricky situation. You have to play queen to d6, although it looks a little bit weird because your pawn is already defending this pawn, but not really. The bishop is pinned. So here, queen to e6 was played. Just to give you an example, if queen to d6, we're going to go into this forced line, queen d7 check, and once this is traded, first we capture the bishop with check, and once the king moves, this is the only good move for black. We're going to capture here, rook captures on c3, rook captures on a5, king captures on d7, and we have this rook and pawn endgame where black is up 2 pawns and of course completely winning. So this is what Jobava has to go for. However, However, he played queen to e6, and now he simply allows Duda queen captures on c7 check. That's very unfortunate for him. Bishop captures on c7, rook captures on e6 with check, king captures, and rook captures on b3. We have king to d5. Now, Jobava still up a pawn, but it's a rook against the bishop. We have rook to c3, defending the pawn, now f5. Now, Jobava will start pushing his passed pawns. King b1, of course, we have g5, king to c2, we have g4, king to d3, now f4, closing off the king from attacking those pawns. So here we have a4 and f3 now. We have king to e3 and now king to e5. So hopefully one of those pawns can be promoted, but it's not going to be easy with the king and rook. So rook to c5 check, king to d6 attacking the rook, rook back to c4, bishop to b6 check, king to f4, and now even f2, threatening f1 queen. So rook to c1 defending, and now king to c7. We have king captures on g4, and now bishop to e3, attacking the rook. And now the rook cannot keep an eye on the f1 square and also on the c6 pawn. So rook to h1, and now we play king captures on c6. And now if we can capture this pawn as well, then it will be very good for us. But white will try, of course, to prevent this. King f3, we have bishop to c5, and now king to e4. We have bishop to b4, trying to put the bishop on e1, so the bishop defends both of the pawns, and you no longer have to worry about anything. King d4, we have bishop to e1, and now rook to h6 with check. And now the king cannot reach the a4 pawn, so you have to go back, king d7, now rook f6. And there is no way for either side to make progress. Rook to f5, we have king to e7, rook to f5, now getting out of harm's way, king e6, rook to f3, king d6, rook to f6 check, king to e7, rook to f3, and it was in this position on move 70 that the players agreed to a draw, which means that neither player will finish the first day on 5 out of 5, rather both of them are now on 4.5 out of 5, same as Magnus Carlsen, who only drew one game and won the other 4. So after day 1, Duda, Jobava, and Magnus are leading the tournament. We're going to see what happens in day 2 and if more crazy games like this will be happening. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thank you for suggesting it. I would like to thank Checkmate Epilepsy, Catherine Matriarch, Jack Schroeder, Jeffrey Redenor, and David Kimura for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of day 2 as it starts very soon. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.